The verse of the day is Genesis 4:6-7, and it says, "Why are you so angry?" the Lord asked Cain. "Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right, but if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master." The title of today's portion of scripture is called Cain and Abel, and to give a little context, Cain and Abel are Adam and Eve's first two children. So this is the story right after Adam and Eve. So we just wrapped up basically what happened with Adam and Eve, the fall of man, and now we're going into the first family. In order to understand today's verse, you have to read a few verses before it. So in verse 2, it talks about how Abel was a shepherd and Cain cultivated the ground. And when it was time for harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel's gift, but he did not accept Cain's gift. And then Cain gets very angry, and that's why God is addressing Cain in today's verse, saying, "Why are you so angry?" The Lord asked Cain, "Why do you look so dejected?" Now, if you're reading this story and you're like, okay, why are they giving God gifts in the first place? Giving God gifts was a way to teach the people sacrifice. So God was teaching them how to maintain a pure heart, because it's in what you give that reveals your heart. And this is kind of what this story is explaining, and why God rejected Cain's gift and accepted Abel's gift, because it was more about what was in their heart. Abel gave his first fruit. He gave the best portion of his flock, but Cain brought some of his crop. He didn't bring the best thing. And I think when God is trying to teach us sacrifice and we don't bring our best, sometimes that reveals a lack of trust. Sometimes that reveals, oh, I want to keep it for me. Sometimes it reveals selfishness. So this is one of the first stories that we see selfishness creep in to human nature. It kind of reminds me of tithing, because when we tithe, we give back to God what he's given us, because everything comes from him, right? So when we withhold and we don't tithe, a lot of times it's a lack of trust. A lot of times it's, shoot, I don't think I'm going to have enough, so I can't afford to tithe, where that's actually a backwards mindset, because you should be giving 10% of what you have first, even if it's little, because it came from God. So that helps you put your trust back into his hands, take it out of your hands, takes the pressure off of you, and is a heart posture of you thanking God for what he has given you. A lot of people also say that God might have rejected Cain's gift because it wasn't a blood sacrifice. And a question you might have is, why does it need to be a blood sacrifice? What is it with the blood sacrifices? It creeps me out. If you go to Leviticus 17:11, it says, "For the life of the body is in its blood. I have given you the blood on the altar to purify you, making you right with the Lord. It is the blood given in exchange for a life that makes purification possible." So the reason why it's a blood sacrifice is because it's an exchange of an innocent life for a guilty one. It's how back in the day they turned from their ways when they fell short, or when they were sinning, or they needed to be wiped clean and were seen as brand new. And this is why Jesus was the final sacrifice, because he carried all sin on that cross, died, rose again, defeated it, and left his spirit for us so that we could do that every single day as well. That is why it needs to be a blood sacrifice, because there is something in not only the purification of it, but also it speaks to the severity of sin and what God requires to wipe sin away. So people were saying, because Cain's gift was his crops, some of his crops, it wasn't a blood sacrifice, so that could also be a reason why God rejected it. But all that to say, that's a little context and backstory. God is addressing Cain, saying, "Why are you so angry? Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right, but if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you." God is saying, hey, I don't accept your gift, but it's going to be okay. You don't need to be angry. Why are you angry? All you have to do is do what's right. So God is giving correction in this moment. He's not saying, Cain, you're doomed and I no longer want anything to do with you. He's saying, hey, this wasn't right, because I can see your heart underneath what you did, and it's showing me that you don't trust me. So let's do what's right so that sin doesn't control you. Let's surrender what I call you to surrender so that you can maintain free and have a pure heart. I love this story because it speaks to what happens when you don't submit your emotions to God. So Cain is angry in this moment, right? Anger is not a sin. It's what you do with the anger. So God is saying, be careful. Don't let this sin control you, because when you don't address your feelings, they turn into actions that lead you to sin. And if you keep reading in the story, Cain ends up killing his brother out of envy because his gift was accepted and his wasn't. So he didn't deal with his anger, and instead it turned into murder, an action of sin. So if you bring that into our life today, when you feel angry, that's not a shameful thing. It's a human thing. These are emotions. God gave us emotions. It's what we do with the anger. So if you feel angry and resentful and bitter and have unforgiveness, it's going to God and asking Him to renew you, to get rid of those things, to fill you with the love that you're needing, to fill you with the trust necessary to let it go and to forgive and deal with your heart with God, because that will set you free and prevent you from doing something that you'll regret and that will be linked to consequences down the line. Because if you keep reading in this story, after Cain killed Abel, God gave him consequences. He said, "Now you are cursed and banished from the ground which has swallowed your brother's blood. No longer will the ground yield good crops for you, no matter how hard you work. From now on you will be a homeless wanderer on the earth." Cain then replied, "My punishment is too great to bear." And so God gives consequences to sin because He doesn't want us to fall into it. Anything bad in the world has consequences, not because God is a mean God, because He's a good Father who disciplines His children. And sin just bears bad things. Sin bears pain. A huge lesson in today's story is that you have a choice to deal with your emotions or to not. You have a responsibility to deal with your emotions or to not, because God requires you to surrender the things that don't align with His heart and to deal with them. And so if you're experiencing anger or any emotion that wants you to do something to your neighbor that isn't loving or doesn't align with God's heart, it is our responsibility to deal with that, to go to God, because every day we have a choice to deal with it or to not, to succumb to temptation or to not. Today's lesson is a big reminder of choosing our faith over our feelings. Okay?